All right, Cliff, what do you say we get this show on the road? More than anything, to those attending this webinar, we wanted to thank you for taking time out of your day, out of your morning to join us to talk about artificial intelligence. We'll talk today about basically what it is, what's the investment implications, what are the implications abroad from a jobs perspective, from a humanity perspective to some extent, the risks and the opportunities. Cliff is our investment analyst and is joining me for this presentation. I, Tim Egart, am an advisor within the firm, and we're thankful to be able to talk about a topic with you today. Before we get started, we should at least speak into the fact that this should not be construed as investment advice. Investing involves risk, and this is just a common disclosure that we want to at least communicate. This has no specific implication to your story or your family. If any of it, just don't want to misconstrue any of this as investment advice. And so, with that being said, we're going to spend about an hour today chatting about artificial intelligence. The first 30, 40 minutes or so, we're going to just go through a presentation. And the last 10 to 20 minutes, horseshoes and hand grenades, we're going to use for Q&A. On your screen, you should have the ability to ask questions that will be disseminated down to Cliff and I. And at the end of the meeting, we'll use that time for some Q&A. And so feel free to utilize that, and we'll go from there. Cliff, I will kick it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And thought I'd start off just a little bit of fun. I was trying to use AI to create a picture of two financial professionals, and I tried to game the system. If you see at the bottom in that little footnote there, I tried to make Tim skinny and balding and me handsome with a full head of hair, but they made us both bald, so I guess I paid for that. But kind of funny, just the way that AI interprets the prompt that you give it and what you ask it to do and what it spits out is pretty interesting. So then I did one where Tim was suggesting try to do one where you do a face swap. So I made a Sherlock and Holmes, just trying to think of a fun duo that was trying to figure things out. So that's us. I think it did a better job for you, Tim, on that one.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever your view on history, I thought it was interesting to see, the bottom line here, the speed of innovation over time has just rapidly increased. I'd like to think that if I was around more than 200,000 years ago, I would have figured out the bed sooner than that. I don't know if you see that there. We didn't have beds till 200,000 years ago, but just that, really just of the last 2,000 years, how much things have just sped up. The agricultural revolution over 12,000 years ago, and I think that by the time 1800 came around, we finally had the steam engine. And to flip to the next slide, you can just see in modern history just how quickly things have exploded. And really, it's just amazing to me to think about just 100 years ago, where we were. We didn't even have automobiles. That was the start of it. So it's just amazing to think of how quickly human innovation has skyrocketed. And to think that now we can edit genes and have the mRNA vaccines would help us control COVID, and to think of just what could be ahead in the next 20, 50, 100 years is pretty incredible.
Interesting how they build on each other, Cliff, to some extent.
True. That's definitely true.
You're seeing moon landings and the intelligence that it takes to launch into that leads to the space station, that leads to other things, rockets landing, SpaceX landing rockets today. It's pretty remarkable how much that builds on itself.
And to think of the technology they were using back in the 60s to launch rockets to control a spaceship in space where they had simple transistors, it's just, I can't believe they did it back then, but
yeah,
they did and propelled us forward, for sure. On the next slide, I thought it was just interesting to think in technology since the 80s. I was born in 75, so for me, this is all flashback of what, where we've come from and where we are now. I just think that the first PC was really back in 1980. And then to get gaming systems in '85, I remember all my friends trying to get a Nintendo Entertainment System was a huge thing. Which the first web browser in 1990, we didn't have the internet. My first job, we had the green screen computer that you did all your work on. You didn't use the internet really. But I think Amazon was started in 1994 and Windows 95 in 95 to a Palm Pilot. I remember getting on Palm Pilot and thinking to myself, why couldn't my phone be in a Palm Pilot? I wish I had really done something with that idea, but somebody else did later on that helped spur a company. And I don't know, Tim, did you have Netflix early on?
I never had Netflix. I remember DVD. I vaguely remember being able to like pick up the DVD. Right? Isn't that the way it used to work? It wasn't, obviously it wasn't streamed. It was you order a DVD, right?
Yeah, I had like a 3 DVD
Yeah.
like subscription, so I could have 3 DVDs at a time. I'd mail it back with a free stamped envelope, and then get it whatever was next to my queue and available. I'd get that movie. It's very inefficient, but at the time I thought it was really cool because I didn't have to go to Blockbuster anymore. Do you remember that story that actually the guy who founded Netflix went to Blockbuster to offer to sell to them, and they said no? It's a bad decision.
Bad decision.
Anyway, enough time on Netflix. But I think that Google was just started in '98, and then they figured out how to monetize that in 2000 with advertisements. It's just incredible to me, like just how fast things have gone here. And I have the Apple Watch on there. It was before that. I actually have a version before this that I still wear. But in 2018 was the Apple 4, or Apple Watch 4, which actually monitors some of your health vitals. So that's pretty interesting to me, in terms of what that can mean going forward. And we'll talk about this in a minute. But just in terms of wearables and helping monitor your health and communicate to your physicians, or just know yourself how you're physically doing, it's pretty amazing to me. And then I put some bullets here of all the stuff that's going on now, between whether it's drones or virtual reality, 3D printing, robotics, improvement in GPS, which is pretty amazing for automating things like farm equipment and all sorts of things, rather than just get directions on your phone. Where back in the day, you print up your maps from the internet, or really old school, have to pull out your map and figure out where you're going before you get the car. To quantum computing, and then of course to what we're talking about today, artificial intelligence, which I think really could be kind of the next really big change that we see in our lives. But let's talk a little bit about the history of AI, which really started back from science fiction. Honestly, if you think about writers talking about robots and actually like intelligent robots. It's even the Tin Man in Wizard of Oz. That was back in 1939. And so I kind of put into the future generation of scientists like this kernel of an idea of, well, what if we could really have that? Because before that, people maybe wouldn't have thought about robots or artificial intelligence. So Alan Turing was a famous mathematician in UK, England, back in the 50s. And he really said, well, what if computers could think like humans, if they could use available information and then use reason to solve problems and make decisions? Why can't machines do that? So he wrote a paper called Computer Machinery and Intelligence, which was about how to build intelligent machines and test their intelligence. So you may have heard of the Turing test, which is about whether a computer can match the ability of a human to think. So there's arguments about whether that's been achieved or not. A lot of people say it could never be achieved because computers can have a subconscious, which is something that we as humans have and we don't think about. It's called subconscious. But that there's this underlying process of thinking going on in the background of our minds that we don't even think about. So whether or not we are there or we'll get there, that's debatable. But it was interesting for him to lay that question out there.
Again, you made this picture just prompting an artificial intelligence, right?
Yes, I did. So it was a very, very simple prompt. Actually, I simplified it down here by just said picture of Alan Turing, basically, and I put some more details behind it, just in terms of like to get some of these other elements. But it is amazing. Like, I did not know who Tim Egart or Cliff Aque were, but they did know who Alan Turing was. But a pretty accurate picture of him. And this was one try. I did not spend a lot of time. So the term artificial intelligence wasn't coined until the 60s, but there was a lot of work behind that. It was before 1950, really computers couldn't store commands; they could only execute them. So you could tell them what to do, but they couldn't remember what they did. And it was also really expensive. So in the early 1950s, it cost more than $200,000 a month to lease a computer. So I went back and did an inflation calculator. So in 1953, it was $200,000 a month. That would be $2.3 million in today's terms. So it was not a cheap undertaking to use computers. I remember my dad, when my dad was in college in the 60s, but he told me he did a computer programming class where he used cards to put in a machine, and so the computer was like a whole room. It was a big deal to actually get access to it. So it wasn't an easy thing to work with. And so it took until like 1955, RAND, which was Research and Development Corporation, developed something called the Logic Theorist, which was a program that was designed to mimic human problem-solving skills. And this really sparked a lot more interest in it. So a couple of professors at Dartmouth, John McCarthy and Marvin Minsky, started holding conferences to bring people together to talk about how to kind of make a dedicated effort to artificial intelligence. And eventually that's kind of coined this phrase, artificial intelligence, from there. And really, they kind of pressed the government to fund some programs. So the first ones were from DARPA, which is Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, to fund AI. They were really interested in trying to, if you think about the Cold War going on, they wanted to transcribe and translate spoken language and speed up data processing to really try to get ahead of Russia and others. So they started funding some programs. I think the big thing holding really development back was just computing power and processing speeds, because it was just it couldn't keep up with what they were trying to do in terms of developing these systems. Some of the first things were expert systems, you may have heard. So that kind of popped up in the 80s, where they were trying to train systems to be an expert in different fields. So it's kind of go to an expert, ask them questions. What if this scenario happens? What do you do? Kind of iterating from there and kind of getting every scenario into this expert system, so you can query the system to find out what would the expert do. And Japan actually was a big proponent of these. But AI kind of fell out of kind of the limelight, I'd say, in the 90s. In 1989, we had the artificial neural network developed, which was kind of interesting. If you see a little graphic here on this slide, really they're trying to mimic the human brain, having a lot of interconnected nodes. So these nodes would then be trained to learn. So you think of like an image recognition software. You'd input this image and it would say, okay, here's a starfish. It looks like a star. It has this sort of texture. And it would kind of train the nodes to, then the next time it saw a starfish to say, okay, I recognize this shape. It's probably this. And kind of go through all these different kind of calculations to figure out what's the probability that this is a starfish. So that was kind of an interesting development in terms of trying to make a computer look like a human brain. So we had some image recognition stuff, coming through. If you think today of just looking at your phone to open it up, it's pretty amazing how far along that's come. In terms of speech recognition, those programs really started in the 50s, where they were amazed to get something to recognize 10 words. And now you can just speak into something and record your voice, and transcriptions are pretty accurate. Unless you're my wife on her watch sending me a text, I'm usually totally garbled and I have no idea what she's trying to say to me. But otherwise, I think speech recognition's come a long way. And then to natural language processing, which I talk to investment managers all the time. And years ago, they were using natural language processing to listen to earnings calls or read through SEC filings to kind of find out what management's thinking and kind of what their outlook is for certain things. And so that's just really blown up, as Tim will talk about generative AI in a minute here. But just to think of how far that's come in such a short period of time. And I think that speaks to, if you've heard of Moore's Law, which basically said that every year the computing process or computing memory and speed would double. And that just looks like a hockey stick going up in time. So I think we're really caught up with kind of where AI needs computers to be for where it's going today. And so if you think about open source AI, which is just democratizing the data, and there's lots of places where it has implications, and we'll talk about those in a bit, but right away, in terms of healthcare, just drug discovery, helping diagnose patients, communication between you and your physician. I mean, almost everybody has an app now that you can talk to your providers through, and things, it speeds things up tremendously. And the transcription of medical documents and having those things available where things aren't all over the place, and things are kind of being pulled into one spot for everybody. So I think there's just so much that it can help there. And in terms of education, I mean, the internet really revolutionized access to data and information. But now you can just ask, you can ask ChatGPT, which Tim will talk about, a question and have a conversation, sort of with it to figure out what you want to know. I think there's just so much that can be done in terms of building tools for teaching kids and learning, and even teaching adults. So I think that there's a lot that's going on, and I'll turn it to you, Tim, to kind of go into that next generation of AI.
Absolutely. So that defines a little bit around the history of artificial intelligence. But one of the pieces, there's a number of different types. But generative AI is the buzzword, so to speak, in society today. And what is that exactly? And essentially, it is a broad catch-all for models that use AI to generate an output. Think ChatGPT at the bottom of this bullet point list. If anybody on this webinar has utilized ChatGPT before, you're essentially prompting ChatGPT to provide you with an answer to a data point, and that's what this artificial intelligence generative AI is. It's generating an output for you. There's foundation models trained on unlabeled data that can actually help to provide some predictive algorithms. The backbone of this, of generative AI or ChatGPT in particular, is a large language model, which we'll talk about here in a second and what that specifically is. But it's effectively a large language model is an AI trained on a vast amount of data to be able to interpret and generate human-like textual output. When producing that output, it's largely using probabilities that the output that you're looking for is what they're providing. And a little bit of data behind that. Again, I mentioned the parameters are the backbone of a large language model. So this just helps to communicate the size of those parameters. Some of the smallest have 94 million parameters, so to speak. OpenAI, which was ChatGPT-1, OpenAI is effectively the creator of ChatGPT, which I believe was just bought by Microsoft for $10 billion. So if you think about like the magnitude of how serious artificial intelligence is, how serious large language models are, how serious generative AI is, well, Microsoft just put 10 billion behind it. So it is a material move of money towards that particular AI. There's a number of different AIs, but the size of these matter. So you can actually create. So think about like the parameters as the backbone. Think about the parameters being every single thing written on the internet over a source of time. That's what an AI or a large language model can actually drive into. And so ChatGPT-3 had 175 billion parameters. ChatGPT-3 was released in 2020. ChatGPT 3.5 was released I got the date here, March 1st, 2023. ChatGPT 4 was released March 14th, 2023. And you're seeing the size of these parameters get progressively larger and larger and larger, which just speaks into, here in a second, we're going to put a little bit of data behind this. It's getting smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter.
I know, Tim, we have it says undisclosed number of parameters there for ChatGPT 4, but it's 1.5 trillion that was actually released. So
thank you for adding that, Cliff. So you go from 175 billion parameters, and again, think the size of the parameters is just the amount of data points that this system has. So you go from 175 billion parameters in 2020 to 1.5 trillion parameters 3 years later. The size of these things is remarkable. So then looking at the performance of them, so again, going from 3.5 to 4, this is simply the performance of ChatGPT 3.5 versus 4 on various tests. Cliff passed CFA level 1 a number of years ago. ChatGPT did it in like 4 minutes. And did a great job on the test.
Still, it does level 2. Level 2 is the killer.
Yeah, fair point. It hasn't quite passed level 2 yet, but we've got various levels of exams, and you're seeing actually the difference between 3.5 and 4. 4 is yellow, 3.5 is blue, and you're seeing the more parameters that you're putting into the system, the smarter the response, the more accurate the response, and the faster the response overall. Whether that's the SAT exam, whether that's the bar exam, whether that's a medical licensing exam, you're seeing the system get smarter the more parameters you're producing into it. And they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And part of that is based on the fact of, to Cliff's point a second ago around computing power. Computing power is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And you're seeing that filter through into some of the test scores for ChatGPT 4. So that just speaks into a test. But where else does this potentially have some use cases? Well, you can think around contract management, the creation of a contract, right? You can think about it as a content creation. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and one of the individuals on stage said, "You know what? I've got some clients that are worried about volatility. I'm going to go into ChatGPT and I'm going to have a 2-paragraph answer on why we shouldn't be concerned, or what is volatility, what does that mean for markets, and how do we respond to volatility in markets." It wrote up a 2 to 3 paragraph response. ChatGPT did. The individual read it, affirmed that it aligned with what they wanted to communicate, and kicked it out to clients. In a matter of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, he went from "this is a thought that I have" to producing content to it being delivered. And so for content creation, whether that's for marketers or anybody, it's a wonderful source of potential knowledge, as well as just quick response to those things. You think about process design, you think about product development. So specifically as it relates to drug development, can you imagine the amount of the speed at which we can interpret data and produce potential use cases as it relates to drug development and improve the human experience overall? So that was another way. Overall, so life sciences is training large language models on molecules, proteins, the human body for improvements overall. Here's some more specific generative AI use cases, whether that's consumer goods and retail, providing in-store product finding assistance, whether that's understanding the customer more real-time even than we know today, providing virtual fitting rooms, whether that's media and entertainment, providing intelligent search and tailored content discovery, curating personalized layouts, right? Whenever I go to Amazon Music and I want to listen to this particular genre, it's automatically going to provide different songs that align with exactly what I'm hearing. And you're constantly being reinforced with that, tailored to that specific person. Again, going into manufacturing and serving as an expert co-pilot, providing prescriptive services, and enabling natural language troubleshooting. There's a number of use cases specific to any particular industry, any particular job to some extent. With that said, there are some risks associated with generative AI, artificial intelligence, and there's broader implications than just one specific use case here or there. Cliff, can you share a few of the risks that we see from artificial intelligence?
Yeah, really. And the image that I did not create. This was the Pope in a fashion designer's jacket. And funny, Damaris here saw this picture and thought it was real. She figured the Pope was just cold. But it was one of these deep fakes where they put the Pope in fashion designer's jacket, and the fashion designer had a racy advertising program out that the Pope would definitely not support. So this caused a lot of this was this went viral on the internet and went all around until it was proved that it was fake. But just funny how these things can come out and people believe them as true. So So that's one of the risks that I think AI poses in terms of just disinformation and spreading things that just aren't true. Even faking people's voices. I heard someone got a call. They thought they got a call from their daughter. And they were in trouble, but someone had just gotten a hold of their voice, from a couple minutes of recordings of the person's voice to create their voice and say what they want to say. So there are some, there are risks out there if this gets malicious group uses it. The term hallucinations, which you see at the top, is sort of AI kind of making something up. It doesn't necessarily know the answer, so it's going to kind of try to give you the best answer it thinks is right, but it might not be right. Melissa Duval, our IT person, wanted us to say that you are not talking to a person. It is a computer. Does not necessarily know the right answers, but it will give you what it thinks is the right answer, but it could be completely wrong. So that's what I have: garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you train that model with is, it's not high quality data, then you're not going to get a high quality answer. I know a lot of companies don't want to use AI because the sharing of data, it's called a data lake, where all the data kind of goes into this lake so the AI can learn from it, but you don't necessarily want your data to go into that lake. So there's a lot of proprietary databases being built right now as we speak from to different companies, because while OpenAI could be a great thing, it can also be a little bit dangerous. So I know there's a question in the queue kind of about job displacement. Yes, that is a risk, but it will happen for sure. But does that create opportunities to move to a higher and better job, or to do something more productive with your time than those certain tasks that you were doing, that AI can do quicker and maybe better and more efficiently than people were doing before. And so Tim will get into that in terms of the implications. But yes, there are risks, but there are potential rewards. So who's going to win from this? Go to the next slide, Tim. We can kind of talk about the different areas that stand to benefit. So there's the infrastructure, right? That's the data providers, the cloud services. You're going to need security, of course, semiconductors. Obviously, we've heard a lot about this in the media in terms of onshoring some of that semiconductor production. A lot of it happens in Taiwan. Concerns about China, with Intel's building a multi-billion-dollar chip factory in Arizona. As we speak, they're doing that. It's going to take a couple of years to get it up and running, but huge undertaking in terms of developing that processing speed that we need to be doing all of this. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity on the technology side, but then who's going to implement? I think there's a lot of potential winners. In companies that aren't in technology, from consumer companies, obviously e-commerce. E-commerce is still only 13%. This is the last stat I saw of sales. People still go to brick and mortar stores. That's going to keep evolving. I think COVID sped it up a little bit, but still, it's still a fraction of total consumer purchases. And Tim mentioned healthcare. I mentioned healthcare before. That's a fantastic place. I hope that really speeds up development, technology, and drug discovery to really just further help our lives. The U.S. has actually had a decrease in life expectancy. I think the only developed country to have that happen. So hopefully we can turn that around with some developments in healthcare. In terms of just processes, I think that AI is going to really just help businesses improve processes, whether it's from manufacturing to just customer management to handling documents and things like that. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to cut out waste in companies and automating things in factories. And it's been happening, but with AI and becoming even smarter, I think that's just going to really improve that tremendously over the coming years.
Yeah.
You have anything to add to that, Tim?
No, that has a lot of applicability. So you think about like use cases that are very tangible to a company, that are very tangible to a specific improvement that we can make, from drug discovery, from e-commerce, from consumer, from business process, consulting services, factory automation, name it. There are use cases for AI. Now, what does that mean while one company does it or one use case, what does that mean for us, right? What does that mean for the United States? What does that mean for the world? Well, here's where we sit. So this is the Congressional Budget Office. The Congressional Budget Office estimates trendline growth for the United States going out to 2052. And for a number of reasons, one, the largest being demographic changes within the United States. The CBO projects that trendline growth for the United States is 1.8% annualized from 2022 to 2032, dropping down to 1.6 and dropping down to 1.5%. Some of that has to do with just the potential labor force, but then also labor force productivity. And so what does that then mean as we look at artificial intelligence? Well, this is an estimate from Goldman Sachs in terms of potential changes to GDP growth. So a few broad things here. One, McKinsey Global estimates that generative AI will add about 2.6 to 4.4 trillion in value to the global economy. Goldman Sachs predicts a $7 trillion increase in global GDP attributable to generative AI. So if trendline growth in the United States is falling, it projected to continue to fall. The thought process is that advancements in generative AI can improve productivity to actually increase the new baseline growth for the United States going forward. And some might say, well, is that a flash in the pan? And maybe. The thing that I think about is, so look at the technological changes that we've experienced in the last 10 to 15 years. A lot of it was launched off of mobility, right? The creation of the iPhone, which then launched the app world, so to speak. And 5-10 years later, you have a billion trillion dollar company in Uber, in Airbnb. These new markets popped up purely based off of the creation of the iPhone and mobility. And some might argue that social media, which was really launched out of that and expanded out of that, was maybe not entirely a net positive to society, and certainly in terms of productivity, it may not actually be all that positive in terms of productivity growth for the United States, rising out of social media or mobility. But then we look at what generative artificial intelligence is actually producing, the potential improvements that we're seeing out of that. And one might argue it can materially enhance productivity, which is the challenge that the United States has had for 10 to 15 years, 20 years, really coming out of the financial crisis, is productivity growth. And so if we look at this baseline case of falling productivity and what artificial intelligence can do, you get a new baseline that is positive, above 2%. Like 2% trend line growth is historical. It has been kind of the trend line growth for gross domestic product in the United States. And if we can advance that above two to get to 2.5, that has material implications for the United States. Phil and I did, and this speaks into, and forgive me, I'm going to go back to that question. One of the questions that rose was, will labor market disruptions amplify the damage to, or will there be labor market disruptions overall? And yes, of course. That's a challenge for any enhancements in technology. If you think about the internet, if you think about the number of technological improvements that we've had, there's going to be job displacement. And the hope and the expectation is that we can move workers further upstream to a higher, more productive use overall. That would be the hope coming out of that. But if we can grow, it has broader implications for the United States. Phil and I did a presentation on the U.S. deficit a number of months ago. Obviously, it is high, and particularly for a peacetime environment, relatively peacetime environment. This is the highest debt that we've had to GDP in our nation's history in a peacetime. It harkens back to where we were in World War II with a very material debt to GDP ratio, with a forecast that isn't as bright. Well, there's two ways to solve this. One, you spend less. Given the political challenges that we've got in our government right now, the idea of spending less feels not right here, right now. But the idea of growing more, if we can get a more productive economic base, that can dramatically improve our gross, our net to GDP, our net debt to GDP. If we can grow faster and you can get above trendline growth, that massively improves this overall status. Cliff, anything you'd add there?
No, I think that's right. We need to grow out of it. And so I think the advancement of generative AI gives us at least a hope that that is achievable. We could grow out of, because we had tremendous growth in the 50s, right? If we could get a piece of that going forward and not have declining productivity, but rather increasing productivity, I think that would be a fantastic outcome for the U.S. So yeah, I think this at least gives us some hope of there is a glimmer of growth on the horizon, potentially.
So with that in mind, we wanted to leave a good 20 minutes plus for some questions, and we have a number of them that are available today. We would actually ask you if there's any questions that anybody has, please feel free to use that Q&A, and we'll get to those. First question up: is BAMG using or planning to use AI to build, track, verify, predict client investment models? So I will say this, not at the present moment. We are not using artificial intelligence. And in fact, actually, one of the concerns from our compliance officer before we even got on this call was actually saying we aren't using AI. There's a big SEC is really hampering down on folks stating that they're utilizing artificial intelligence when they're not actually. And so not at the present moment. Can I see that in the future? Yeah, I certainly can. Cliff, anything you'd add?
Yeah, as an input, right? This is, again, it's the garbage in, garbage out type of thing. I mean, there's been robo-advisors for a long time who will look at your financial situation and give you a portfolio based on what you tell it. I think the human aspect of asset management is, thankfully, I don't think that the investment advisor role is going away due to, there's so much personal information that the computer would not understand, or needs that people have that the computer could not understand. So potentially down the road, I could see there being a use case for us to use it as an input. But today, it's not part of what we're doing. So yeah.
Say goodbye to your doctor, say hello to your nurse with an AI on their iPad. The legal profession is similarly AI-able.
Yeah, I'd be terrified if I was a lawyer or went to law school. I took the LSAT after I went to Georgetown because it was in DC, and that's kind of what you thought you might do, especially as a government major. But I kind of always liked finance. But really glad I didn't become a lawyer, because I think AI can answer those legal questions pretty quickly, and it can certainly find case law faster than a junior lawyer going through the old dusty library of the law firm. So I think that's definitely a risk in terms of healthcare. Again, I mean, I think you're going to need doctors, and you're going to need real nurses to check your vitals and things. But there's certainly advancements that are being made in that front, which I hope makes it easier for doctors. And we had a in-person luncheon on healthcare, and concierge doctor was in. She was speaking about how she had to leave the rat race because she had to see hundreds of patients and spend her whole weekend going through the records and updating the notes, and it sounded like a horrible existence. So I hope it makes it easier for doctors and people who want to become doctors because AI is helping them. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, well, actually, the thing that I think is one of the more concerning parts of this is, so if you're to the point of legal advice, say you're an attorney for 25, 30 years, well, you've got a mountain of experience. And if large language models or ChatGPT or these types of improvements actually remove the need for that entry level position, so to speak, well, how do you then get the experience? This is one of the comments I've heard Phil Daniels, one of our partners, comment on. How do you get the experience of 5, 10, 15 years of seeing the ins and outs that allow you 25 years to have that body of work, that experience, to be able to communicate into a challenge? And if we are so to speak, automating some of those roles, those early entry roles. How do individuals get that experience? So I think that's a little concerning in terms of that. But yeah, I mean, particularly when it comes to a lot of writing, large language models are dramatically improving it. So yeah, it definitely improvements in that front. The concern would be the experience that one gets early in early stages of their career. Um, So another good question: will labor market disruptions amplify the damage to and undermine nation states? Secondarily to that, how does diversification among asset classes insulate us against this? Um, we'll answer the first question. Will labor market disruptions amplify the damage to and undermine nation states? Um, Potentially. I mean, I do wonder around the nation states. I do think market disruptions are always concerning, labor market disruptions in particular. And you can see like broad trend dynamics. If you think about like the history of globalization, so and the hollowing out of so to speak the Rust Belt, right? Did that have labor market implications? Did that have political implications to the United States? Of course it did. Of course it did. And I would argue the same can be true here. I don't know entirely what the implications of that are, right? I don't know what that looks like 5-10 years down the road. I can just say, yeah, anytime there's labor market disruptions, I can argue there can be some damage and some potential political fallout of that, no doubt about it. Undermining nation states, I don't know how far I'd go with that, right? I mean, if you just look at the United States, I mean, it's a fight to create and compete in this space. So I don't know if I completely see undermining nation states in this, but Cliff, I'd feel free to disagree with that and speak into that if you feel differently.
No, I don't feel any differently. I mean, I think that gets back to that, also that disinformation type of stuff that you could there potentially be unrest caused by AI? Yes, so yes, but if anything, that's going to be something that's underlying already that kind of spark that.
Yeah.
And in terms of if it's just AI taking jobs away to kind of hurt labor markets, I think that yeah, we're a long way from that right now.
I think the real problems are if you're not net growing. Right. I think that's the challenge. Like if you look at the trend line for what we were sharing a second ago, I think more and more problems are actually created by limited, like a growing population and a limited GDP and a slowing GDP. So I think that if anything, our current trend line is more concerning in terms of like labor market disruptions and challenges. If you grow that whole pie more materially, I think that's a more net positive to society than the current trend line overall. How does diversification among asset classes insulate us against labor market disruptions that could potentially undermine nation states? I think the only answer to some extent, that answers the question. Actually, diversification is the hedge against disruptions, right? If a challenge is going on in Europe because of this, well, we've got United States equities or fixed income or alternatives or real estate. The same is true if it's happening in the United States. That's why you've got other pieces of that pie, so to speak, to help offset some of the risks in one area versus another. President Biden recently issued an executive order regarding AI. What protections did that order provide, and what else might be before Congress presently for them to consider in terms of protections that have been identified as necessary? Cliff, did you read that? I had not had a chance to read that executive order. I have some thoughts on this, but do you?
Yeah, I think basically it was it's more directed internally as government, from my understanding. It's kind of they want each federal agency to have their own chief AI office, and some specific agencies have their own AI strategy, and then have some coordination around it. I think they're just trying to say, hey, this is happening. We need to get our arms around it, each of the different arms of the government. So I think that there's going to be more to come on top of it. It was kind of just saying, you need to understand the risks. have some uh, privacy pieces put on top of it to make sure that we're not just using AI and letting stuff get out. So I think they're just trying to say, hey, within the government, we're going to be using AI, and I hope they do to reduce the size of government. But let's have a coordinated approach to it, is my understanding. But I don't think it didn't give protections to like the regular civilian per se. I think it was more of Biden trying to say, or is whoever is telling him to say, that we need to have some coordination around AI and its uses, and how do we protect ourselves and the U.S. citizen and what's going on.
AI may be the most rapid accelerant of wealth and prosperity in human history for some. For others, it will mean the end of their jobs. How, going forward, does an investor deal with this inevitable chaos? You have a thought, Cliff?
Yeah, stay diversified. We'll keep looking for how this is affecting various parts of the market, but yeah, I think the it's inevitable chaos can it's like the old saying of like the Chinese word for crisis, also the same word as opportunity. I think I'm probably totally mishandling that, but chaos brings opportunity, right? Templeton said, "There's blood in the streets. You should be investing," right? So I think yes, there will be some chaos, but stay diversified. Take our opportunities where we find them. Then, yeah, if it's an accelerant of wealth and prosperity for some, that's good for everybody in the greater scheme of things. Some people will definitely have see the other side of that, but I think the net benefits should outweigh the the chaos.
Yeah, and actually, I was half thinking about the chaos. Right? When does the world not feel like it's in chaos? Right? If I look back over the course of my lifetime, well, there was a financial crisis. There was COVID. There was a financial crisis. The Twin Towers fell. There was a couple other wars. There were a number of it. We had a number of experiences that felt chaotic, and that doesn't necessarily mean we run from that. And to your point, Cliff, and Warren Buffett said, when some are greedy, be fearful. When investors are fearful, be greedy. And the fact is, life will change, but it always has, because that's ultimately what happens. But the stats that I wanted to share here actually was relative to this question. For others, it will mean the end of their jobs. So some might project that half of all work between 2040 and 2060 will be automated. Goldman expects that two-thirds of U.S. occupations will be affected by AI-powered automation. So from our perspective, I don't have a fear of losing a job. I actually look at it in terms of artificial intelligence can dramatically affect our ability to serve clients, our abilities to do that more effectively, more efficiently, with more data. We actually see it as a net positive to the industry, not something that's fearful of running over us, so to speak. And so, again, going back to it, there's definitely risks associated with it, but on balance, we're seeing it as a net positive to growth in industries. Let's see here. Which industries are most threatened by AI? Like content creation, written copy, film, TV? Cliff, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on that with healthcare and legal, but in terms of content creation and like music creation or art creation, I know like look how easy it was for me to make that picture of Alan Turing, right? It's like if I was an artist drawing that, it would take me weeks. It took me less than a minute to make that picture. So yeah, there's going to be disruption. There's going to I can see, there's definitely already movies that have been, basically all done by computers, right? It's not, there's no, I mean, the humans are involved in telling the computers what to create, but it's all created on the computer. So yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be one of those things where you either love it or you hate it. in terms of what's being created, but there's still going to be people behind it. Someone has to tell the AI what they want to come out of it, and it's not perfect. Like tried to get Tim and I to look totally different, and the AI made us look totally the same in that first picture. So it's not perfect, and it's not going to replace humans, forever. But I think of like Bruce Willis, who was going under some health challenges. He sold his image and his voice and personality to an AI creator, essentially. So you might see Bruce Willis in movies in years to come, and Bruce Willis isn't around. So it's interesting. I mean, there's definitely going to be some changes because of it. But I think again, this will be possibly for the better. Right? If people don't like it, they'll go the other way and go back to totally analog things. But if people embrace it, it could improve or make content even better. So I think that again, it's one of those things of yes, there are risks, but I think that creates opportunities.
Yeah. A good comment here. I believe the opportunities will be great, as 2/3 of what drives the U.S. economy is consumption based. Things that have to be designed, manufactured, and delivered. How do you see AI changing some of these businesses, staples, energy, manufacturing, supply, and logistics? Cliff, you want to take a run at that?
I'm just reading it over again. Yeah, no, I think it'll definitely improve logistics, manufacturing. These are things, that we had severe issues with coming out of COVID. That if there was, a better system in place that could have been alleviated, maybe we wouldn't have seen this runaway inflation. So maybe this is another thing that helps us kind of push down inflation if we can improve just processing. We moved to this like just-in-time inventory thing, which totally backfired when we didn't have enough inventory. If we could have some improvements there on how things are made and delivered to our customers, yeah, that's going to have a huge impact on the economy.
Yeah, there's a quote somewhere, like data is the new oil, so to speak. Like it is what is driving things now, like data on everything, right? You can get it now with computing power. Again, going back to Cliff's comment on Moore's law and the computer power getting progressively stronger and stronger and stronger, and the chips that NVIDIA is making getting better and better and better and better. We can get data on almost anything, right? The idea of a watch producing my heart rate and telling me how I slept at night, the power that's coming out of this. So think about having a chip on every single little product that is shipped around the world, or a chip or a device on every single, like a supply chain, right? The trucks that are driving across the United States, or the ships or the barges or anything, having a piece of data on almost anything, anywhere, anytime. The amount that you can then consume that data and apply process improvements, real-time data improvements, real-time understanding of your customer. That's true for whether it's Walmart, right? One of the things, Walmart has a 30 PE, price to earnings ratio, right now as a retailer, is because most likely because they bought Jet a few years back, and they're producing just in time, and they're moving things online more and more. And so the idea of artificial intelligence just producing and taking a ton of data across the board to produce improvements in real time is incredible. Let's see. Data requires fair point on this one. Data requires oil or coal or electricity, and massive amounts of electricity. You're absolutely correct. You are absolutely correct. There's a number of changes going on from an electrical standpoint as it relates to this, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's oil. I did just see ExxonMobil spent $100 million to purchase some land in southern Arkansas to become a lithium producer down there. So yes, in terms of natural resources, the game is definitely changing across the globe.
And I'd say again, here's where we can talk about opportunity, right? Like talking to an infrastructure manager that is basically doing the Intel factory build. That may be an opportunity for our clients in the coming months. But on the other hand, they are also investing in different energy projects that are feeding these these data centers, these massive data centers that are popping up. And there are places in the U.S. where we have excess capacity for electricity. So the data centers aren't dumb. They know where those places are, and they're building in spots where they can get cheaper electricity to to use in their center. And this infrastructure manager is locking in like take or pay contracts for the electricity with escalators based on inflation. So again, there's opportunities to benefit. And I think we will continue to see that move toward clean energy. It just takes time. I think there was a lot of excitement about it with the infrastructure bill, and a lot of money went toward it, and now it kind of came back out, realizing that it's not getting there that quickly, but it will. It has to. So I think we'll continue to see innovation in energy. I was at the Science Museum this weekend, and there's a energy section that we're walking through. I compared appliances in 1980 to 2020, and just the difference in just the lower amount of energy that we're using through efficiency. So I think we'll just continue to innovating in that. If you think about an old tube TV versus our LED screens now, just how much less energy they use. So I think yes, there will be more and more consumption of energy, but I think we'll get more and more efficient at the same time.
That gets us closer to 11 o'clock, which is our stopping point. We wanted to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Artificial intelligence, it's material, and it can have a pretty material impact in terms of our future here in America. It's not without its risks, it's not without its challenges, but net, we are viewing it as a positive improvement to society in general. We wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your day. If you have questions following up out of this webinar, we're always available, and so feel free to reach out at any time. We look forward to our next webinar and to be able to see you soon.